Welcome to the Multiethnic Church Planting podcast and video, sponsored by Exponential. I'm Len Tang. I'm a church planter and the director of the Fuller Church Planting Initiative. And I'm excited for our topic today and our conversation on funding for multi-ethnic planters. And I'm joined by my colleague Corey Lee and our special guest Troy Evans, who I'll introduce in a minute. But in this series, we are focused on empowering planters of color. And we are hoping that that's going to be enlightening to both our white and non-white listeners on this podcast and video and that'll become clear as we unfold the conversation. But let me let you introduce yourself, Corey, before I introduce Troy.
Hi, thanks, Lynn. Yes, like Lynn said, my name is Corey Lee. I also was a church planter, planted in the Atlanta metro area, and served in that area for 18 years. Just recently relocated to South Jersey to finish grad school, so I'm excited about that. And so had the chance to work with Lynn for the last about 2.5 years, and I'm excited about the work we're doing with supporting kind of multi-ethnic church planters. And really excited to be here with Troy. We got a chance to talk. I think it was last month. I had a great conversation about some of the work that they're doing, and so I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Well, again, really excited to have Pastor Troy Evans, also known as PE. He's been married to Dawn for 28 years. He's the father of 5 kids and many grandkids as well. PE was raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and surrendered his life to Christ when he was in Detroit and began serving in a local church. Having only a sixth grade education, he went on to become a network engineer, worked for several of Detroit's big corporations, and then later started a tech staffing firm. He and Don have planted 4 churches. I think you win the award for serial church planter there, and has served in urban ministry for 26 years. He's mentored dozens of church leaders and planters and has become a widespread speaker, a go-to person in the area of urban church planting, as well as urban ministry and small business startups across the US. Troy has appeared on the 700 Club, TEDx, NPR, and Focus on the Family. He planted a multi-ethnic hip hop church called Edge and launched an urban church planting network in England. I kind of want to hear the backstory on that one. He currently serves as the urban church planting catalyst for the Wesleyan Church here in the US, and he's president and co-founder of the Nitrogen Urban Network. And they're committed to equipping leaders to do the work of urban ministry. So great to have you, Troy. For you to share a little bit more about yourself and kind of why this particular topic of funding multi-ethnic planners matters.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for having me, man. I'm really just being an urbanite, specifically, I feel like, just a melting pot of people, right? Just you walk around the corner, you're gonna bump into different cultures, and I just think it's amazing. I think that's something amazing to be able to be a part of. And but does it with all of its beauty, it also comes with the beast, right? And the beast is that the complications of or some of the barriers that come with being a person of color, as far as funding and creative means to do so. It could be a little bit daunting. And so for me, having got the battle wounds after a quarter of a century doing this, I'm just excited that someone's talking about it, talking about this topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways we really can't talk about urban church planting if we don't address the funding piece. And I think that gap has existed in a lot of the kind of the white mainstream church planting world, kind of a lack of awareness of that gap and that need. So I think maybe you can help enlighten us and paint a little bit of the picture of some of the kind of the inequities from a historical context that kind of have brought us to this place. Because everything, we didn't just arrive at this point, right?
Right. Yeah.
So share a little about that.
Yeah. From my perspective, I feel that, funding, it's heavily dependent on your networks. Your networks. But yeah, you can build and you can do networking, but a lot of it's built on the networks that you've already built. And so and you whether no matter what approach you take to developing your fund development strategy, it always starts with a circle with you in the middle, and you draw a line out here. Then who is this person? Then who is this person? Who they know? That becomes a means to at least a framework to go after funding. But if that's you in the center, this first ring of support is really critical. And I think, especially with people of color, specifically in the urban core, man, the circle gets really tight. Who do you have that you can reach out that you feel that would give to your initiative? I'm an equal opportunist, so I will say that I know that there are all people of color in core, right? That's not the situation I'm painting here. I push people of color to really dig deep in their pockets to give the churches and organizations that are capable of giving to start doing so, because then we can see the dollar rotate within our community, within people of color. We need to see that more, and we need more of us to push us to be more responsible with our funding when you're capable of doing so. Having said that, I would say that if the immediate circles matter, then we got to go to, well, then what are some of the issues? If you're a suburban white and you're everywhere you work, play, worship, and live, you're not forced to be around people of color, or you're not around people. You don't have the blessing of being around people of color often. Then you're left with just a few ways to come up with your own perspective about people of color, right? You're left with TV. You're left with your environment going to the movies. You're left with your work experience with the person you may bump into that you may spend some time with. But that's what you're left with. And so when you're sitting on that board, you sit in that committee, and you're making the decision whether to give to a initiative that a person of color, you're walking in the room. The person of color is walking in the room with like 10 steps behind. So now I have to get you to get to know me, outside of the things that your limited experience with people of color. And I've done that. I've had to walk in those rooms so many times, where I felt like I had to climb out of a pit that I didn't create myself. And I'm not sure I want to push it to xenophobia, but I think we're leaning towards that, where it's a little bit of the fear of the unknown. I don't know you, bro, so let me get to know you. But man, it's a lot of climbing for you to get to know me when I'm coming with my resume, I'm coming with my background, I'm coming recommended. But there's still other things that you have to climb over simply because you're not used to dealing with a person of color.
Yeah, absolutely. Our social location determines so much of our self-understanding, our experience with others, right? How we vote, there's so many implications to our geographical location and our social location. And I think part of the work that we're doing is to try to kind of raise that awareness.
Yeah,
right?
man.
That these are not necessarily, they don't have to be divisive, but there is a level of understanding that kind of has to happen in order for equity to begin to take place.
Yeah, can I say this? I remember one situation, as we all are often probably pulled into rooms and having good conversations, and I get good, meaning, Holy Spirit filled people. But I remember this room of denominational leaders. I was the only representation of urban in the room, so I guess the conversation maybe was pointed towards me. I don't know, but from a I guess it's from a network or national standpoint of having access with multiple people around the country and beyond in the urban space. I remember this denominational leader said a statement, and they were talking about funding. Got to this conversation around funding, and again, Anglo, suburban dude, and he basically is he was, I think he was sincere. He was saying like, man, and he just blurted out and said, man, I'm sick of these urban pastors thinking that we're the welfare office. You gotta unpack that a little bit. Like that is something to sit on and think about, because the perspective is that, wait a minute, you said that you have funding available. You said I should be a part of this family that we call a denomination. You said that you give funding to everybody. So then when I come, why is it that when urban people come, then we're seen as we're looking for a handout, and we start doing these weird games, hand ups or handouts? I don't think that hand up or handout garbage is biblical. I just don't think it's biblical. I think we stand on this idea of stewardship, and that's just become a cheap word, quite frankly. A cheap word to be the guard, the what do you call it, the protectors of the galaxy, and where it's like, man, it's God's money, it's not yours. And then to have to have a person dig out of that, and then for them to feel like they're going to the welfare office even to be a number.
Mhm.
Man, it's just it was I didn't even know what to say. I normally always got something to say. I had nothing to say.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you going to jump in, Corey?
Yeah, well, and I think to add on top of that, Troy, you mentioned that you encourage, people of color to give within their networks, and our last, I think it was at a one of the presentations I saw you at the My Boulevard conference, and you were talking about, hey, we should not say no for anyone. Ask
Yeah,
everyone,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
no matter what their budget
yeah.
is. But when you start talking about that circle
Mm-hmm.
and who's in that inner circle, the disparity between the discretionary income
True that.
for the people that are in that inner circle, for people of color,
Yeah,
and for, you know, a lot of our suburban white brothers and
yeah,
sisters, the disparity is it's tremendous.
yeah,
And
man.
so even when, and this goes to the comment about, being the welfare office, is like, you're not the only people we're asking. The problem is we're asking our networks, and our networks just don't have the same access
Facts,
per capita
facts.
as your networks.
Yeah.
So, but and then the question is, how did we get to that inequity? And I think that's what we're addressing and we're dealing with, as when we start talking about, funding for multi-ethnic planters.
Mm.
Yeah, and I mean that's it's like we're at the tip of the iceberg of right a much bigger conversation about historic inequities and how those came to be. Maybe that probably ought to be its own podcast. But I'll just say very briefly, like as a very small example, there's uh, a housing justice organization here in Pasadena called Green Line Housing, and they seek to actually provide down payments for people of color to be able to afford their first home
Mm-hmm.
because they've noted that the average white household has 9 times the network of the average black household in
Mm.
the US.
Mm.
And we know why that, we know lots of reasons for that,
Right.
where historically African Americans were denied the opportunity to get land when the West was opening up, to get land grants, to get GI built, the GI, uh, loans after the war. So there's lots of historical reasons why the things came to be the way they are. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't just come out of nowhere.
Right.
So like, that's just kind of 101 sort of stuff. But all of that, there's a cumulative effect, right?
Yeah.
Where essentially the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Yeah.
And from a kingdom perspective, like we ought to, like James says, we say to the rich person, you sit in this nice, you know, pew, and you poor person, you sit over here on the ground. And so there is a sense in which, like, yeah, we actually do need to address those historic things in order to be able to see churches of all kinds in all communities flourish.
Yes, sir.
So there's a gap. There's a big gap. And we're trying to creatively and boldly, and sometimes with some challenges to our white brothers and sisters, to say we need to look at these
Hmm.
inequities. And again, it's not asking for a handout. It's saying the wider body is missing out on some of the richness of
Absolutely.
culture and the way that the gospel is reflected through, in this case, the Black church or the Asian American church or the Latino church or multi-ethnic churches. So we're missing out on that until and unless we actually come alongside and empower all planters to be able to fulfill their God-given mission.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about kind of how some ways to have hope, in facing a lot of these obstacles around
Hmm.
funding from all these different streams. What are some of those ways that we can, or maybe even like if there's a specific kind of story of a planter that you want to tell, Troy, about how they're able to kind of overcome some of these funding barriers and get a church off the ground?
Yeah, I could think of one named Chase. He planted a church in Michigan, and so he he fought the temptation of building, or his own building, which people of color, we often feel that pressure of I need my own. He fought the temptation long enough, and he partnered with good partners in the city to share space. And so he did that to do his pre-launch. Then he actually launched out of our space, which was his second move, which was amazing. And then when they were ready, they moved into another building where they did a land contract, and now they own the building. But what I thought was pretty dope was to see immediately the mindset to go to, all right, we really only need the bottom layer to do what God has called us to do. We got a whole upper space equal size with just filled with offices. So I think there may be like 6 or 7 nonprofits that have
Mm-hmm.
mission alignment, Christ-centered, nonprofits that are doing great work that he's leasing space to. And then which I think I think there's one of the few assets that we do have. Being is when we do have a space, then how do we maximize that? Not only for kingdom impact, which includes financial stability, and so that to me was really cool to see that that was willing to share space, which comes with its own challenges, but it moved them very quickly into where they can actually afford to be in that building long term.
Mm-hmm. So just kind of the like resources around like physical property
Yeah,
and space for worship and ministry.
absolutely.
And creative. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Um,
Yeah, and we're talking about money um in this conversation, Troy, and we know that money isn't everything, but it does matter a lot. Um
Hmm.
and so when we talk about funding for multi-ethnic planters, what are the typical inequities and the context? I guess we've talked about that a little bit, but I'm wondering, are there specific things that are hindering um, multi-ethnic planters from getting access to funding?
Sure. Yeah, I think some of it is external, and some are internal, things which all may derive from, I guess, some inequities. But obviously, we said our networks. So the people that we know that know people is a huge one. I think that's one of the biggest ones. I think information, where the information is being delivered on, if there is specifically for like grants, if there is RFP, how do you know where to get those? Where if it's not delivered in our ecosystem, in our culture subcultures, then how? Oh yeah, it went out, but it really doesn't. It really doesn't hit home. Those are not coming across my desk. Um, I would say, internally, I would say, are you are you uh, are you fundable? I think knowing how knowing how to pull and extract the holistic approach to the holistic ministry impact is critical. So, do you have a case for support? Have you flushed out a case for support as a ministry? Those it creates a huge barrier because we're walking into a room where there's already a disconnect. But we need to be able to clearly, in 1 or 2 pages, clearly to say, this is what God has given us to do. And here's how we're going to do it. And here's what it costs. And give a couple of stories of success that we can lay out. So are we fundable? Financials. Those are barriers. Who's managing our finances so that we can provide the reporting we can provide the financials necessary to manage the finances once we get them, and then also report on them, which leads to my next point. What is our reporting systems? How well are we doing with reporting? And I think these are a lot of things that if you're never taught, then how do you expect to learn? Like you don't know these things. I know that, man, the Lord has called me. I know that we're doing great work. I see multiple people giving their lives to Christ. I see people growing holistically. That's all I got. And that is in essence fundable. But when going to a broader stage, we need just a little bit more robust way of presenting that information. That's what I believe. And I'll say the last thing about reporting is that you could land a grant with good writing, but the way you get residuals is by having great reporting. And if you don't have great reporting, maybe I should give some context. My wife worked for the Kellogg's Foundation for years, and she worked in philanthropy for years, and then also fundraising for years. And so our church plant, The Edge, was a bunch of teenagers. 30 teenagers is how we started. Teenagers, we always say we minister to the homeless people's kids, and that are always on the move. So we're very transient. So to have a $400,000 budget and you got a bunch of teenagers, you got to ask the question of how are you going to get that money? You know, so for us, for 15 years, 70% of our funding came outside the church walls. And so for us, we're knee deep in this conversation of how do you get resources from the outside, and the way we were able to have via a text some of your major foundations saying, hey, yo, bro, would you support this? You know, that type of relationship is because our reporting, following up and being able to report on the things that we've done and be able to celebrate what God is doing, and then it's something that can be quantified. So I think that, to me, it's a big one.
So that's a really great insight that I heard you say there's both a need for greater sort of financial literacy like overall, but then some specific training around grant writing and grant reporting.
Right.
And does that then necessitate the need to kind of think about planting alongside starting a nonprofit, a 501c3?
Yeah, bro. Listen, we decided. I had a good conversation with Dr. Perkins years back. He came and I had the honor of just driving around for a day, and just like, man, the way he described the church based and those 8 principles, it was never to be separate. It was never to be separated, to have these 2 different entities, because it's very difficult for Jesus to get the credit that way. And so it's like, man, we built The Edge prior to even knowing that was his thought. Is that we built The Edge saying that we want Jesus to get the credit. From day one, our first 2 hires were a fund developer and an administrative person. I took a pay cut so that they could be hired. I just so happened, one of the fund developer, our first one was just so happened to be my wife, right? So, but we thought it would be critical if we know we're walking into this. Why are we thinking about these other weird things? We know financial sustainability is going to be a problem. Why not make your first payment, hire somebody else, get a job, hire a fund developer, and talking about sustainability? And just while I'm at it, like, I think as we're talking to denomination networks, the next $70,000 you spend, if we're talking, are you serious about urban church planting? Hire a fund developer. That's a special skill. I've been in sales for years. I didn't know jack about fundraising. I made a lot of money in business, but I knew nothing about fundraising. It's a completely, I thought, hey, a sale is a sale. A customer acquisition is customer acquisition. No, sir. This is something different. Fundraising and all this stuff. I feel like I got a great product. You need it, buy it, and that's just not how it works. And so getting someone that has that expertise in fundraising is critical for the church. Because if you're in the urban setting, you can't just hire Timothy Group or something like that for them to come in and come up with a campaign, because the campaign is going to be based on, okay, let's pull from your constituents that's in your congregation. Well, bro, we're squeezing this lemon. There ain't nothing else to get. There's nothing else to get from here. So what else do we do outside of there? And so you need someone to be thinking about strictly thinking about, how do I resource this amazing ministry that God is doing? I don't know, it's kind of a tangent, but I think that's a critical piece there, is that if we don't find that person, it's like not having a worship leader.
Wow. This is incredible. Um, a lot of planters, particular planters of color, are bivocational. And so what are the opportunities for bivocational or co-vocational planters? Are there kind of second vocations that you would recommend? And how can those second vocations become part of the mission rather than just kind of, funding?
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question to, because I have a different philosophy about that.
I would love to hear that philosophy then, because
here it goes.
Yeah.
Yo, I just feel like it's too much passion juice running around with social media. Do what you're passionate about. Bro, I'm 52 years old. That's not how we grew up. You need to work because work is good. That's the blessing. I think we need to flip that over, because everybody's looking like, I want to be on my mission as I'm doing work. Where does that come? How does that pay the bills? When you got a bunch of young cats, our church, the old people in our church is 32. You got a bunch of young cats, and they're looking at those of us that are the Michael Jordans or the one that make it to the NBA. The few of us that working full time in ministry, they think that's the goal. They believe that that's the only goal. Like, oh, I'm passionate about this, and then I need to be doing this, something missional for my work. Well, maybe the most missional thing you can do is do what God gave us to do in Genesis 2, which is to work. What if that to bring him glory and magnify his name, lift him up, is to do the work as unto him. As we're doing that, I think that's critical for a church planter to know. Like, any work that you do, as long as you're not stripping and you're not doing something weird, bro, it is good. It is missional. Because Paraclete, Holy Spirit, and dwelling Spirit, you are walking in the building. You're walking missional. You know what I'm saying? You're walking missional day. You are walking. You're living that thing out. The moment you open your mouth, the moment you put your hands to it, you're coming in the name of the Creator. You know what I'm saying? So I think that makes it. So I back up a little bit from that, but I say that, and then I always say that I've been co-vocational, and I think as we age, when we get older, I think those things start to align where our mission, I wrote a book about it, but that's what I'm so passionate about, where our occupation and our passion collide as we get older, and as we're trying to gain experience, and we're planting and we're trying to figure stuff out. They may not collide at that moment. They may be separate things, but I say it all to say, here's some things I would say. I would say, things that can sharpen some of our soft skills. So look for administrative roles, jobs. A church planter has a level, whether that I'm not an admin, but I have administrative gifting. But I think some administrative roles could be an easy one for a planter. A marketing jobs, content creation, anything that takes creativity. Right now, creating content is a thing, and I'll try my best not to get on my soapbox, but AI. As a former engineer, it's just like, this is a place where people of color, we got to catch up. This is the opportunity that I've never seen before since the World Wide Web. is that it's $20 is the cost of entry. $20 a month, where everybody is the same, no matter who you are. We're all at the same place in this piece, and it is a part of life. And there are jobs there, and you don't even have to know how to code to do it. So I think that Chick-fil-A ain't open on Sunday, and they pay well. It's a great part-time job, and obviously I'd say the blessing, the manna from heaven for church planters is Uber and those kind of things. That it's just I don't think it gets any better than that, man. So.
That's great. That's good. It's good theology, right? Of the goodness of kind of all of life, right? That we can do anything as image bearers and glorify him. So I love that kind of, it's a refreshing take on embracing bivocationality rather than somehow resisting it or manipulating it. So yeah, that's good.
I know we just talked about co-vocational, but and you've mentioned some things, sharing space, but are there any like businesses that you would say are good for planters? Things that are kind of turnkey, is like, look, you just plug and play and it's a good fit.
Yeah, I'll be a little redundant, but I would say, starting businesses is hard. And keeping them open is even harder. And the hardest is making a profit. Just having done this, in our church, we did weird things. One of them is that we started a lot of companies with youth and young adults. We would invest a lot of money, help them develop strategy, and give them coaching to go a long way. We started 18 companies with youth and young adults owning them. And I own about 4 or 5 myself. And so it's very hard, and everybody shouldn't do it like everybody shouldn't plant a church. Mm-hmm. And so I don't put that out there and tell people to go start. The last thing I would tell a person to do is to start a t-shirt brand. I've done it, got one, and by God's grace, have pretty decent platform, and have more importantly, my kids and my brother, they're big platforms, and it is hard. $20 at a time is hard. It's hard work and social media would have people to believe that it's easy to start a business. Well, go look at the numbers. The numbers don't make sense. It's not that easy, but there are some things. Window washing. Window washing. Window washing is something that needs to be done, and there's good margin there.
I've heard power washing is another thing.
Power washing, these are these labor jobs that people don't want to do that pay very well. You're in, you're 45 minutes, boom, 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 you're out. And you're getting paid very well to do those things. And the residuals, because those people inside the building don't want to come outside of it. I would say the best turnkey are finding small businesses that you can buy. So maybe going to some of those funders and asking them we're in the process of doing that now, but with the business, but to say, hey, would you be willing to not be an angel investor, because that means I got to give you your money back, but would you sow a seed and invest in me buying this business? But again, you got to know numbers. You got to be able to pull that, profit and loss, and just, and be able to balance sheet, more importantly, to be able so that they can look at it and say, is this thing making money? And let me show you how it is that we'll be able to be sustainable in 2 years by using something that's already working. A friend of mine just did this in Lansing, bought a window, bought a business that was already profitable. That to me is the best turnkey solution that you can actually walk into, because it's proven that it's going to actually make money. Otherwise, if it's not making money and you're doing it and you're calling it a business, I don't think it's a business. It may be a great hobby for you, but it's not a business. And so we really have to, I'm really careful. I haven't done it several times, and out of those 18, maybe 3 of them are still alive. In the last 15 years, and so it's just, I would say there is content creation is going away, but if you can couple AI with content creation, and AI solutions, like can you walk into an organization? A skill to learn would be to walk into an organization to be able to speak to an organization on how you can actually implement AI with your existing systems, your written systems, and or your applications. Again, you don't have to be a programmer. There's a Google certification, which I just obtained, and I'm not that smart, right? AI Google certification, and you can take the certification, and it will give you enough to be able to be extremely dangerous in helping provide actual solutions that people need.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you're sort of opening up these new worlds in terms of kind of um, income for planters. As you've been training urban church planters, kind of how would you describe this process of capacity building? Because there's even just what we've talked about so far, there's like a lot of really creative like
Mm-hmm.
options. Um, how do you kind of how do you take people through a process that's not like completely overwhelming, that, does fit their gifting and their context? Like, how does that play itself out?
I'm sorry. Could you rephrase it? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, you've shared like a lot of interesting ideas. How does like a typical planter kind of get from A to B? How do they kind of incorporate some of these ideas in a way that fits their gifting and their context?
Mm-hmm.
Not be totally overwhelmed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. I believe we know that planters numbers they float, but man, they're a lot more successful when they have a coach, pre and post launch
Mhm.
coach. I'm a strong believer in holistic coaching and discipleship, meaning I need a person that actually cares about my well being and my occupation as much as they're concerned about my soul equally. Um, so having a coach is critical because you got an honest coach. They're not going to lie to you. If you suck at it, they'll tell you.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And saying like we're just not going to beat a dead horse here. You're not good at that. Let's move on.
Yeah.
And then I'm a thorough believer in assessments. So if we can tap in, and I do have some on our site, but there's assessments that you can take just to we have one for the book I wrote called Capo, so calling occupation, um, passion and opportunity, but basically to help you identify. So what does God uniquely call me to? Which is make disciples, and then what occupation am I most I can be thinking about, basically asking a few questions to get you closer. But then my point is getting an assessment to get a baseline to say like, okay, in these areas of this vast area of work, ministry, my personal life and ministry, what does that look like? I think assessments are critical. And then opportunities, I think finding spaces where you can start flushing things out. Try throw some stuff on the wall, just do it Nike style. You know what I mean? Like if you're in this close thing, just don't sit on it for 13 years. We don't have time like that. It doesn't exist anymore. It's having these thick business plans, like 90 pages, and then you do nothing. Like, no, no, no. You need to do something within the first 45 hours of getting that. Do something. Say, I believe. And Lord, I'm going to step out on this. And Lord, I'm going to need your direction. Be my next step, and help me to guide me. But we'll move forward on that. Once you got an assessment, you have a coach who can confirm and affirm, like, okay, I think you're going in the right direction. Go. Just go do something. Get as close as proximity. Volunteer somewhere that allow you to gain some of those soft and hard skills. But it's a good starting place. And then that's something that we do help people navigate through.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Troy, we talked a little bit about kind of some of the process that you guys walk planters through
Yeah.
at Nitrogen. Um, and some of that may have been what you covered, but are there kind of a number of steps when you bring a planter into your organization that you walk them through as part of their training?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I kind of scattered it, but any healthy network is going to have these things. We just contextualize it to the hood, right? And so that is recruiting. So we go through a thorough recruiting process to see if it's a good fit. But to your point, assessments. I can't say that enough. The behavioral assessment give us a good north. Where are we going? What are we going for? Coaching, what I mentioned. So we have robust coaching that we immediately we get a person with a coach that they'll have somebody that's telling them the truth, that's lovingly telling them the truth and helping them to navigate. Training, recruiting, assessing, coaching, training. So we provide training on multiple things. But one of the things that I'm not sure if you're going to get in your seminaries, I don't know if you're going to get any. I haven't taken any of that stuff, so I'm not sure if you're going to get any strategic planning training. So we're typically asking pastors. Pastors are asking other people, and they're expected to come up with strategies. They're supposed to be strategists. They need to be strategists. But where is practical training for that? We do provide that. So we equip them to be to do. We just use the most model that we remixed, and basically mission, objective, strategy, tactics. But teaching a person on one pager, you can actually figure out what your next year looks like. But so we do training, things like that. We do practical training on not just discipleship, but how do you make disciples? So we have a theological footing, which is dope. But then, okay, what's the practical? What do you do day 1 through 40 on doing those things? So those are some of the things that we do. Then we do training on fund development. And then, so we start all the way from the beginning. I think you and I, we met when I was doing a piece of our, just a little piece on that. But the coaching comes alongside that. And then we do networking. Then we get them with others that are struggling with the same things. And then the last thing we do resourcing. So we have a lot of, again, we're AI assisted organization. Obviously, actually, people can't work here unless they're game to get it cracking with AI. And so we have tools. We have agents, custom GPTs, about 30 of them. Just about anything you can think of in terms of what a ministry would need to do, from assess, you name it, fund development strategies, answer 15 questions, it develops a fund development strategy for you based on $1 million winning grants, and so I think resourcing them, and then also financial resources as well. So as our recruiting, assessing, coaching, training, networking, resourcing, that's our path that we take every person through through what we do.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, our friend JR uses the acronym CARTS for those same kind of things.
Oh, right? Okay, there it is.
Coaching, assessing, recruiting, training, support.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, 5 functions of every network. And since we're talking about that, I mean, if you were talking to another network leader who is saying, "Hey, we know the demographics of our country are changing. We know that our cities are becoming more and more multi-ethnic. We know that we have a gap in terms of like who's currently planting and who needs to be planting, in the coming years." What specifically around funding, but more generally, how would you counsel them to kind of think about their funding strategies?
Man, y'all asking me hard questions, man. Because I'm gonna be honest, that's just the way I am, bro. Like at the end of the day, it's like it's either we put up or we shut up. At the end of the day, we can't keep on talking about urban urgency and all these urban initiatives. Either we're going to do it or we're not. And any business person, any person that does business in any way, shape, or form, if we're not serious, we can have these strategic objectives, but we're not serious about those objectives unless we put money behind it, we got a person behind it, and we have a strategy. If we don't have all 3 of those firing at the same time equally, then we're not talking. So just take it off the table. I would tell you, don't do urban church planting. That's what I'll tell you. I'll say, don't do it unless you're willing to put all 3 of them, because you're wasting your good time. You come up with, you get burnt. Because I talk to leaders and they haven't planted in, like some places, they haven't planted in urban settings in 30 years. 30 years. When I was in England, 52 years. I haven't planted in the hood. And the reason, like, man, we had a church plant that went bad. Really? We all know this. We know the numbers. How many church plants failed? Like, no, it was that urban, that person of color planting, it went bad. So then we pulled back. I'm saying, if you ain't about it, you don't have to do this. Don't do it. Stop hurting people. That's my first thing. It's like, get out the way. But if you are serious about it, and you are looking to say, well, how do we need to figure out the financing. We need to truly figure out what does it mean to get a person. Let me go to the person. I think you need to get a person. Sometimes we need to segregate in order to integrate. We have to, because if we need somebody that's going to sleep every night, that lives, breathes, and thinking about urban people of color and multi-ethnic things. about specifically in church planting, which is a weird human. Like I'm with two of them, by the way, right now. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like these are weird people. It is what it is. Like it's getting very narrow, and to find them and identify them and say, I need you to dream, sleep, think, poop, everything about urban, multi-ethnic church planting, and think about these three things, because I can't as the denomination or network leader. Get me someone to be thinking about that. And this strategy. The strategy is so critical. We have the recruiting, assessing, culture training, network resourcing. My concern is that we don't contextualize those. Let's go to resourcing from a financial standpoint. For some strange reason, we want to give urban people the least amount of money. That makes zero sense. Insurance is higher. Parking is higher. Everything costs more. It's like, we need to give you less. No, you need to give more. And then it's like all lives matter type of stuff, and all churches matter. Like, no. They do all matter, but it's not equal. It's just not, it's not equal. It doesn't, we never operate our church like that. We treat people as people, individuals. They're not numbers. They're individual. Like, who are you? I know I had this person that dealt with the same conflict, but you're a different person. So let me deal with your needs individually. We have to do that and stop being, we have to be more ministers than we are caseworkers.
Wow.
Yeah. Laying it down. Telling the truth. No, I appreciate it, Troy. Just being blunt and honest, and helping people not pretend that it's something matters if it doesn't, if it's like you said, if it's not actually showing up kind of in terms of resource allocation, that's the ultimate litmus test.
Because it may be something we want to do, it may be a dream, and it may be I don't think it's this sinister thing like, oh, they're just trying to blah 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 blah. No, I just think sometimes you haven't counted the cost, as Jesus warned us about. Count the cost, and it's okay. It's perfectly fine to say, but just say it. Don't play with it. Don't throw black faces and brown faces on stuff and trying to do this thing. Like, no. We're not interested in that right now. Please pray for us so that we can get, when the time comes, that we are prepared for it. We're just not equipped for that right now. And just move out the way.
Yeah. Good.
Amen.
One of the other kind of ideas and hopes that like our, the team that Corey and I are part of, this group that we're calling the Multiethnic Collaborative, one of those team members is talking about how we can create kind of economic incubators in communities of color, so that those businesses can grow, and that church planting over time is getting funded from within communities of color, and not only depending on money basically from the white world. And there's not yet a roadmap, but one of the things he wants to do is to invest in underappreciated Black and brown businesses so that they can grow as employers, as, investors, as supporters. Any kind of thoughts about that in terms of where we're finding and generating and asking for money?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Could you rephrase it? Are you asking? Yeah.
I guess I'm just hopeful about this idea of one of our teammates, Chris, to be able to create. He called it like a Black global economy that becomes its own funding source.
Yeah.
And that leads, that's like super empowering. It's not dependent. It's not as dependent, right, on money outside the community.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that looks like, to be honest, but I just, even the thought of it, the vision of it,
man,
it is motivating.
Yeah.
And inspiring.
I don't know if I have much to add to it. I would just say, man, I salute and we're coming together, being a body, jointly fit together is always good. And so I think when you create a equitable space, so there's no big I's and big U's. The bishop doesn't walk in and he sucks the air out of the room because this guy is whoever or whatever, or the guy with the big money comes in and he sucks. Then now we're creating the same type of environment. It's nasty and sloppy and dirty. So we have to make sure we make this place sterile. And we're coming in almost like nobody's going to be called nobody by their titles. That's literally what we do in our Thrive program. That we don't use the titles. We honor their titles, but here we can't because we want to make sure that everybody's in an equal playing field. So if this guy's coming with $2, this dude that has $2,000, they're still equal because they work equally as hard to get the resources, and they're coming to the table. So I would say creating equity within our own system so it doesn't get tainted, or we end up in the same place.
That's good.
It's just that people look like you that's doing the damage.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, Liz Rios, who's part of our team, she says that, that's empire. We don't want to mimic empire. So yeah, I love that. Well,
open-handed sharing, being honest, brutally honest about, this is what it is. One thing about me, anybody around that works with me, like, we ain't gonna fall out about no money. I'm from around the way, and I've seen a lot of bad things happen because of money. And I said, as a believer, it's just not going to be that way. So then, how do I protect myself and protect others? It just be brutally honest about the money stuff. Things get funny when it comes to money. So if we can be honest and like the paperwork is out, transparency, yeah, that's a word just thrown around, but what does that really mean? Like, can everyone have access? Can everyone look at the numbers, look at what it is, and we know offer it before we make any decision, before there's a dime that comes into the ecosystem? This is what we're going to do with the money. Here's how it's going to go. Here's what's going to happen. And coming up with those SOPs, figuring out all those systems, and before we touch a penny, it's going to be key. I just said that. And how do you make the decision on what you're going to spend on?
Yeah, sounds like a lot of accountability.
Yeah, straight up.
Stewardship, that builds trust all around. I think that's beautiful. Well, as we're wrapping up, if you were talking to, hopefully we are talking to a bunch of planners who are saying, "Hey, you're singing my song." Any other words of advice that you give them, and how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. The one thing I'll leave you with is that, remember, there was a shift in the fundraising world where they came up with this term, advancement officer. And my best painting of this, what this is it's when you smash the fundraiser with a friend raiser and a public relations person. Bring them together. And the big part is, it's like, man, you got to bring awareness about what you're doing. And you have to package it in a way that's straightforward. More pictures, less words. Pictures tell a lot of stories. You have to come up with the strategy for fundraising. Multiple revenue streams for your fund development strategy. Have someone to own that, and then friend raising. Because our networks are smaller. Okay, let's work that to our advantage. Now, figuring out identifying people that know people. So we all have two people that know people that have resources, but we typically hang out with people like us. So they would have 2 or 3 people. Who's your top 3? And spend a lot of time with them and ask them, make the ask and asking them, do you have 3? And take things a lot further. The way you get in touch with me is just nitrogennetwork.org. And we have a lot of resources out there. Just go there. You can click, and we have training and all kinds of free stuff out there for urban leaders. If you're a network leader, we also have some services that we provide. If I could, I just wanted to add about one of my asks. I did a bit of research with 12 network denominational leaders. And basically at the end of it, I asked 14 questions. What are your barriers? Biggest barriers were we don't know how to do urban church planting. They had about 1,500 churches that they're responsible for. We don't know how. And the other one was we don't have people. We don't have urbanites. My plea to multi-ethnic church planters, don't become selfish once you plant. If you don't have people coming up to you asking you like, hey, pastor, I want to plant a church. Something's going wrong. We're not talking about it. Once we get ours, we're doing deuces. No, say that. So for us, we are running into a bottleneck where we really need church planters in North Carolina and Charlotte specifically, and Atlanta. We have resources, we have systems, we got a lot of loving people that give a lot of hugs. If you know anybody, anyone out there that you would like to plant in Atlanta or Charlotte specifically, we're ready to get you planted, and people that are going to love you and that understand you.
Great. Love the specific ask. So, right, Atlanta and Charlotte, North Carolina. If that's part of your calling, get in touch with Troy. Corey, anything you want to add as we wrap?
Um, just grateful for the conversation. I think we've touched on some very important subjects and matters. I like that we've talked about the historic inequities, but I really appreciate, Troy, you talking about, in spite of those inequities, there's still something that you can do.
Yes, sir.
But it's going to take work. You're gonna have to put in the work to do that. And so I think that's important. And most of the planters of color I know are willing to do the work, but then it's about knowing what to work at. And I think you've shed light on that, and that's so important. So we appreciate your
We're here to help.
contributions to this conversation.
We're here to help. If we can help you in some way, hit us up, and there will be a price associated with it. But we got senior citizen discounts.
Right on, right on. Great. Hey, we're so glad that thanks Troy for joining us, and I love the passion and wisdom and insights. Super helpful new stuff that I learned today for sure. If you those who are watching or listening, if you want to hear the rest of the podcasts or videos in this multi-ethnic church planting track, you can visit the Exponential YouTube channel at Exponential US. And then to learn about the multi-ethnic collaborative that Corey and I are part of, you can visit churchplanting.fuller.edu/multiethnic. And we'll be gathering together as planters of color at Exponential Global in March of 2025.
Yeah.
Hey, awesome to have you, Troy. Thanks everyone for listening in. This has been awesome.
Yes, great talk.
All right. Bye-bye.